right, everybody, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me all right without a microphone?
No, speak up.
Is that a yes?
No, can't
No.
hear
Is that better?
you.
Okay. A little bit. So welcome to our 2021 National Breed Seminar. This is one that the Education Committee provides every year here at the National, and we have other ones throughout the country throughout the course of the year. I first of all would like to, my name is Bob Drescher, I'm chair of the committee. I would like to find my note. There it is. Oh, it's not it. Anyway, I want to thank the committee for the work we've done this year and also acknowledge or mourn the loss of one of our committee members who's also an icon of our club for years, Lori Nickerson, who passed away recently. So may she rest in peace, and we send our condolences to her family and her many, many friends, of which we are all here friends of hers. So anyway, all right, these are your presenters today. I'm Bob Drescher. This is Vicki Beaumont and Michael Metz. So we have a lot of years of experience in the breed, but that doesn't make us experts really, and it doesn't mean we know everything there is to know. It makes us students of the breed. And I'm hoping that's why everybody is here today, because we're all here as students of the breed, hoping to learn something or maybe teach us something. So I'm asking for your participation in this seminar today. Feel free to raise your hand, make a comment, ask a question, and so forth. We're here to learn and share ideas. And our format today is we're going to start with covering the breed standard. And this is important because we have aspiring judges here. Raise your hand if you are already an AKC licensed judge and you're here because you need this seminar to be approved of for our breed. Okay, good, thank you for attending. Raise your hand if you're here because you need this seminar because you're a prospective futurity judge. Okay, a couple of them. And the rest of you are here out of curiosity or? Well, we're glad to have everybody. So we're going to start with the breed standard. Then we're going to actually have some photographs of some common faults as well as some correct structure. I think those things are very helpful for us. The idea being we want those of us who judge or are aspiring judges want to be better judges. Judges shape the breed along with breeders. The dogs that judges put up, breeders are going to breed too. So we work together, and it's important that we understand correct structure, correct motion, correct character, things like that. So that's what we're going to try to cover. And then we also have some observations and recommendations we're making for when you judge. And so that's what we're going to cover, and then we'll go downstairs to the ring and we'll have our hands-on portion for those who are requesting certificates to get approval to judge either futurities or to judge our breed. Okay? So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Vicki.
Thanks for coming. Bob asked me if I would cover just a quick overview of the breed and the history of the German Shepherd dog. I think John, my husband, suggested that he wanted me to do the history because he thinks I joined Max back in 1899. With the breed. So that is not true. It was several years later. Anyway, the breed was developed in Germany in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s. They were attending herding dogs. How many in here do herding? Perfect, that's great. You probably know then that they don't work in the same manner as for example, border collie. These were tending dogs. okay? Max had a vision for the perfect dog, and he started the SV, I believe it was 1899, like late 1800s, and almost immediately realized, oh, I just realized something. Everyone say hello to Carmen Battaglia. He's our judge for the weekend. Anyway, Max realized almost immediately that the breed was being replaced in the herding field. So he turned his attentions to developing a breed that was utilitarian for a number of purposes, mostly law enforcement, military work, that sort of thing. And so our breed has become known as an extremely versatile dog. It can herd all right, but it can do many other things as well. His purpose for the breed was for the breed to be a working dog. He went on and on and on about he wanted the dog to be remembered as a working dog. Supposedly, the legend is that his final words as he was dying was that to allow the shepherd to always be a working dog. So when you're judging the breed, please bear in mind, tending dogs do not run 90 miles an hour. Tending dogs, if they were to do the speeds that we sometimes see judges allow in the ring, okay, would have their sheep in Canada and Mexico in no time. This would not work out very well. A law enforcement dog, can you imagine the ridicule that they would take if you sent a dog for the bad guy and he gated out to him? I mean, dogs go like a bat out of you-know-what to get there. So these have to be athletic creatures. They should be judged at a pace that you can see the working ability of the dog. And before I turn it back to Bob for a review of the standard, please keep that in your mind the entire time you're working. When you see a dog and maybe his hindquarter is a little more extreme, ask yourself, could that dog clear a Schützenhurdle? Okay, could he scale a fence? Could he turn on a dime to turn back a sheep? Does he have that ability? Okay, the answer is no, it's probably not correct. Okay. So keep that in mind. They should be able to do a job, and they should be able to do it at a slow to moderate speed. They should also be able to accelerate and go. I don't know if you've seen overdone dogs gallop. It's ugly, okay? They look like little baby kangaroos. So we don't want that look. We want an athletic, firmly muscled dog, and that's why we have the standard. That's why the standard is so important to us. So if you will take the mic,
Okay.
have a go.
Thanks, Vicki. All right, next slide. So here's a really important point. All right. So breeds are improved by learning correct conformation, movement, and type, not by breeding ribbon winners to one another. But the key point is, if you breed for correct movement, type, and character, you'll have winners. But you'll have really good winners, and that's what we're all should be striving for. Next. The other thing is, and I had already mentioned this, the judge's role cannot be overstated. Judges' selections influence the breed for generations to come. The other one is that the importance of breed type cannot be overstated. And I just want to take a second, and this before we get into the standard, where we're going to be talking about breed type and showing illustrations of it. But, you know, I think all recognize that we are in a dwindling sport. Would anybody disagree with that? I mean, all we have to do is look at the numbers of those of you who have been in this sport for as long as I have. You know what the numbers used to be and where we are now. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, economic reasons or whatever, but maybe part of the reason is the fact that our dogs, if we view them as our product, maybe our product is not in as big a demand as it should be or could be. And what is the reason for that, and what can we do to correct that, improve that? Because if we don't, eventually it's just going to be a handful of people sitting around a ring watching dogs trot around in a circle, dogs that are useless for any other purpose. and they won't be popular and attractive to the general public, which is where we draw our new members, and which is where we sell our pet puppies. And there are segments of our sport and our breed that are thriving worldwide. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that? So let's be open-minded and think about that, and think about what can we do to improve our breed type so that it is becoming more correct and more popular. Next. So the new illustrated standard was rolled out last year. We rolled it out at this meeting last year. It was the standard committee, co-chairman Mary Ellen Kish and James Moses, committee members Vicki Beaumont, Gloria Birch, Ken Boyles, Barbara Lopez, Dave Rinke, and Martha Simonet. And the illustrations are done by Karina Avila. So this is a really nice booklet. Every member of the GSDCA should have received one of these, and we have more of them here today. So with this, we will examine the different sections of the standard, and we will have some comments about those sections. All right, so we've already talked about the history and evolution of the dog. Here's the general terminology. I think everybody should be familiar with this. Again, if anybody does not have one of these books and needs one, we have them available. But refer to these, and this will be self-evident as you go through some of these parts. And that's what the skeletal structure looks like beneath the surface. So the very first section of the standard, to me, is just of critical importance because it talks about general appearance, and it's talking about a strong, agile, well-muscled animal, alert and full of life. It must be well-balanced with harmonious development of the hind quarter, of the forequarter and hind quarter. The standard describes the German Shepherd dog as deep body, longer than tall, and presents an outline of smooth curves rather than angles. It's substantial and not spindly, and giving the impression of fitness and nimbleness rather than clumsiness and soft living. And then there is this. The ideal dog is stamped with the look of quality and nobility, difficult to define. We often call it the look of eagles. German Shepherd dog is a complicated dog to judge, I think more than most other breeds, because we often think of a breed as having an essence. What is the essence of a given breed? But I think the German Shepherd dog has more than one essence. In fact, I would break it down into three parts. First of all, we like to think of our breed as a dog that can perform any task. Maybe not the best at every task, but can perform every task very well. And so they are more versatile. So for that, they have to have the right amount of intelligence, biddability, character, temperament, and so forth. So it's a very, very important part of our breed. So character, intelligence, temperament, trainability is one of the essences of our breed that we're known for and that we like to brag about. The second one is the look of eagles. I was originally attracted to the German Shepherd as a child because they were just beautiful, and the look of eagles, the nobility and so forth, is attractive to the public, and it makes our breed special. And then the third, of course, is the unique movement that our animals have. So it's a complicated breed to judge because oftentimes you have to balance those three factors, and you're involved in trade-offs as you're evaluating dogs and you're judging them. So here's a depiction of a male German Shepherd dog, and we have a photograph of a recent Grand Victor, which in our opinion, it very well exemplifies a real beautiful male German Shepherd with pronounced secondary sex characteristics and very good structure. Females should look feminine. And so here's a photograph of a well-structured, feminine show bitch. Okay. So then we're talking about character and temperament. The dog must be approachable and must quietly stand its ground and meet overtures without itself making them. It's got to be poised, eager, alert, have some drive, and be able to serve in many different capacities. Next. Next. So our dogs should not be timid and shrinking behind the handler or the master, and nervous, looking around, showing anxious expression and so forth, tucking tail, and flinching at sounds or sights. So lack of confidence under any surroundings is not typical of good character. Any of the above deficiencies in character which indicate shyness must be penalized as very serious faults, and any dog exhibiting pronounced indications of these must be excused from the ring. A little bit later, we're going to talk about the loose lead exam. You have to be able to observe the dog's teeth. If it's a male, the testicles, make sure they're descended. If the dog attempts to bite the judge, it's got to be disqualified. From a size standpoint, and this is an area that is quite interesting to talk about, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but the standard's clear. It asks for males between 24 and 26 inches at the wither, and females 22 to 24. It does not say that anything outside of those measurements is a fault. All right? And it doesn't say what to do if you're judging and you have a dog that falls outside of those measurements. And furthermore, we don't measure them in the ring. So I don't care how savvy you think you are. My opinion is, if you don't measure a dog carefully and correctly, you don't know for sure just how big that dog is, or small, okay? So why doesn't the standard penalize size discrepancies? I don't really know, but it seems to me that it should be an area of emphasis, but it can't be considered a fault when it's not called a fault. We all know, though, that those of us who work with working dogs, or have worked with working dogs, dogs that are too large are simply not agile enough to perform the duties that our dogs are really required to perform. So we want to try to keep them in the standard. I think our dogs have evolved into oversized in many cases. So I think that's an area that we need to be aware of. But I wouldn't throw out the best dog in the ring simply because he looks like he's 27 instead of 26 inches, okay? The proportions are longer than tall by a ratio of 10 length, 8.5 at the wither, and the length is measured from the prosternum to the rear of the pelvis, which is called the ischial tuberosity. The length is not derived from a long back. Oftentimes we think of the length of the dog as divided into thirds. The forequarter, the middle piece, and the hindquarter. And a lot of times our dogs that have too much length, it's because their loin is part of their middle piece, their loin is too long, which is a weakness. And so we see a fair amount of that in our breed. It's to be viewed as a fault when you're judging because they don't have the correct proportions. Next. So here we have a depiction of size, proportion, and substance. And this is a depiction of what is correct. Did you bring the pointer? All right. So,
Here it comes.
here it comes. All right. So, 50% of the depth of the body. All right, so the standard says the sternum is supposed to come to the elbow. So if we're going to follow the standard, and this is the sternum, it's at the elbow, right? But what is beneath the sternum is some muscle, some flesh, and some trimmings. So you end up with 50% from here to here, but it's a little bit more than 50% when you're viewing the dog. So it's more like 55% and 45% air.
Any questions?
Okay, so the next slide. So here's an incorrect one. So this is showing 55 coming to the sternum, which is too deep. So we don't have enough distance down here under the dog. So this dog is too deep. Next one. Did we not have
I got
another
ahead
one?
of it, sorry.
Back. Okay. And this one is too long. Okay. I guess we're going to the head now. By the way, you can have too shallow, obviously, okay? We need to have, again, the standard calls for some depth. All right, so the head is noble, cleanly chiseled, strong without coarseness, not fine, and in proportion to the body. So there's a couple of things here. If you look at the head planes on this male from the side, he's got parallel head planes, all right? He's got a very moderate stop and good depth to the muzzle and a strong underjaw. It's obviously a male head, which is important. And just because a head is large does not make it correct. It's got to be shaped correctly, right? And the other thing is, we must go around to the front of the dog and view the head from the front, because you can see dogs that'll look correct from the side, but when you get around to the front, you'll see that the skull is way too narrow in relation to the muzzle. So it's really important to look at them from the front, and that's a really important distinction because we see a lot of narrow skulls on our breed today. And a female can have a strong head and still be feminine. All right, we see the same correct lines and structure to this female head, and yet you can tell it's a bitch. The other thing I'll say is correct proportion, correct size and proportion to the body. So I've seen pictures of dogs that have a lot of body, and you look at the head, and the head's small. Now, it might be masculine, but it's small in proportion to the body. So we want a dog that's got the head that's large enough in proportion to the body, or else it's going to look totally out of balance. Here's the male head from the front. So we have width of skull, we have beautiful ear set on this dog. The expression is good and strong. The head is much broader than the muzzle, and the eyes are set obliquely and are dark. And there's a female head, which again is not too refined and yet feminine. Muzzle must be predominantly black. If it's not, if the nose is not, the dog must be disqualified. Okay? And teeth, 42 in number, 20 upper, 22 lower. And we're looking, when we examine the dog, we're looking at for a scissors bite first. If we have a slightly overshot bite, it's a fault, but not a super serious one, unless it's really overshot. And an undershot bite is a disqualifying fault. So the neck helps to give the dog elegance, must be strong, muscular, clean cut, relatively long. And the dog will carry the head and the neck in different positions depending on whether it's standing or in motion and how fast it's traveling. What we're looking at here though, with the dotted blue line, is where the shoulder blade or the shoulder assembly is, shoulder and upper arm assembly is, in relation to the neck and the withers and the head of this dog. So this is a correct animal because when you draw a line up from the elbow, it should intersect with the wither. If it intersects with the neck or the ears or the dog's head, and I've seen a lot of them, all you got to do is look at Facebook. That's just wrong. The shoulder assembly is supposed to be where it is in this picture here, and the dog should be standing on its forelegs underneath the center of gravity of the dog, which is in the area of the withers. It must be there in order to hold the dog, in order to support the dog's, majority of the dog's weight. If you look at your dogs, which feet are bigger, the front feet or the hind feet? The front feet are, because they're more weight supporting. And what you won't have that particular shoulder conformation if you have a straight upper arm or short upper arm or both, or if the whole assembly is just having gone too far forward, which we see just too much of today.
Good.
Yeah. So again, there should be a prosternum which protrudes an inch or two in front of the point where the shoulder and the upper arm are joined. The croup is shown here, and we're looking at angle of a croup and trying to determine what is a correct angle. So 30 degrees to the pelvis, but 23 to the actual visible croup. And a lot of times, I think people have trouble visualizing when they look at a dog in the ring or standing around or even a picture. Does it have a steep croup? Does it have a shallow croup? How do I know? When the dog, there's a really easy way to tell. When the dog is standing or in motion, other than when they're at full underreach or full follow through, this angle should be the same as this angle. Okay? So if you have a dog standing here and you see a croup that is like this, and this is like this, you know it's too steep, and vice versa. And that's a real quick way, visual way, to see whether you have a steep croup, a correct croup, or a flat croup. All right, the ribs. We want well sprung and long, not barrel-shaped nor too flat. So we don't need slab sides, but we don't want barrel-shaped either. And this is where the standard talks about the sternum reaching the elbows. And just another point I want to make here is that the dogs a lot of times are way too narrow along the back when you look at them from above. We need a broader back to support the muscles necessary to provide for strong athleticism. So we don't want narrow dogs, we want dogs with a broader back, but with proper ribbing. A little bit of tuck up is fine.
Just what you
See, here it is, viewed, loin viewed from the top, broad and strong. Undue length between last rib and the thigh, when viewed from the side, is undesirable. So this area here, if it's too long, there's a weakness there, and it's not desirable. Tail. So a beautiful smooth tail set and long croup are a thing of beauty. And it's important for the appearance of the dog, but also for the function of the dog, in that dogs use their tails as a rudder. We, in my opinion, are seeing an awful lot of tails that are not healthy tails. They're weak, they're dead, what I call dead tails, weak tails, useless tails, lifeless tails that are bouncing off the hock when the dog is trotting, or hanging limp, or doing something other than being under the full control of the dog. So it's not only visually disturbing when you see it, but that's a structural problem because the dog is the tail is the dog's rudder, and it also illustrates what the mood of the dog is oftentimes as well. So for me, when I'm judging, dead tails, lifeless tails, very weak tails are really a deal killer unless I have a class full of them and I don't really have any choice other than to place a dog first that has a tail problem. So this describes the shoulder blades and forelegs. And let's talk about the pasterns. Pasterns, ideal, the standard says the ideal pastern is 25 degrees. I agree with that. I don't like to see pasterns that are really much more than 25 degrees. You know, some years ago, we had a lot of pastern problems, very weak pasterns. If you've ever had a puppy that went down on its pastern so bad and never came up, it's heartbreaking. It's painful to watch. We had a fair amount of that at different times in our breed in the past. A lot of times that is commensurate with pasterns that are too long, which also usually correspond to hocks that are too long. All right? So short, strong pasterns, 25 degrees, really important, and then strong feet, thick, firm pads, and nails short and dark. Because this, you know, think about it, this is what the dog runs on or trots on. It's their contact with the ground, so this needs to be a really strong, well-formed part of the anatomy. And then we have our correct front and faults from the front. Elbows out, east and west, loaded shoulders. So we have to view the dog standing naturally from the front, because the handlers are really good at setting them up, making them look correct when they're not. So this is the first illustration is just showing when a dog is standing four square. Those are some parallel lines between the shoulder assembly and the hindquarter assembly. And then we view the dog from the back. And we do this, of course, as they're going down and back, and also while they're standing. So the correct rear, they stand fairly parallel, and they single track going away. We don't want cowhocks. Next.
I think I'd just interject real quick that this is a spot where, as a judge, where you want to try to have them stand naturally, because you can expose any concerns and see these.
What time did we start? What time did we end up starting? I just want to keep track of the time. Did anybody notice what time it actually was? 13:93. Oh,
That's pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate.
yeah. Could you be a little more precise? Okay. Coat. The ideal coat is double coat of medium length. This is dense as
Your mic is
possible.
off.
You've lost your mic.
Double coat of medium length. Dense as possible, hair straight and harsh. And a little bit of a wavy coat is permissible. A lot of times that's over the croup or the back part of the back of the dog. Vaulting coat includes soft, silky, too long outer coat, woolly, curly, and open coat. So we have two types of long coats. We have the stock long coat, and then we have the, what is it called, soft long coat or silky. The stock long coat has become pretty acceptable for showing, and we even have long coat classes. A lot of dogs carry the coat factor. You know, I can remember when I first got started in the breed, 50 years ago, it was standard procedure when you're getting ready to breed your bitch and you're calling around to stud dog owners. One of your first questions is, does your dog carry coat? And if your dog carried coat, you didn't want to breed to that dog because you don't want long coats, right? And so we've done that over and over and over, enough of us over the years, to where we got to a point, and I think it's getting better, but we got to a point where we didn't have correct coats anymore. We had very close coated dogs. And now it seems that people are not as allergic to having a few coated puppies in a litter. People love them, public buys them, they usually have great temperament, sometimes they're the best puppy in the litter. But it's a small price to pay to have to place coated puppies, sometimes we keep them for breeding, to place coated puppies in order to restore good quality, beautiful, plush, correct coats to our breed. These are the colors that are, the variety of colors that are acceptable. When you're judging, you must become colorblind. You don't penalize a dog because it's a sable and you don't like sables, or it's solid black and you don't like solid blacks, or you have a particular preference. Save those preferences for your breeding program. But when you're judging, all these are equally acceptable. Now, strong, rich colors are more desirable, and good, strong pigment. So now we'll talk about gait, which is, of course, of super importance. And we understand that the gait must be elastic and seemingly without effort. So the German Shepherd dog is a rear drive dog. So it must have a correct, strong, functioning hindquarter, because 70%, approximately 70% of the propulsion for that dog, the forward propulsion of that dog, is coming from the hindquarter. 30% comes from the forehand, all right? But the most of it comes from the hindquarter. So if we have faulty rears, where we don't have correct structure, we don't have correct underreach and follow through, we don't have clean action going away, we are impairing the dog's ability to propel himself or herself properly. And that is a serious fault. We must have a strong middle piece for correct transmission of that power. So we have propulsion from the hindquarter, then we have transmission through the middle piece, and this is where the strength of back and the short loin, correct loin, is so important. It's also important that we have correct shoulder placement and the shoulder assembly, the structure, the skeletal structure of the shoulder assembly be such in length and angle that we have a high enough wither so the dog is propelling itself not only forward but slightly upward. The center of gravity on a German Shepherd dog is at the wither. The faster it goes, well, it's sort of toward the rear of the wither. The faster it goes, it moves slightly forward. But because that's the center of gravity, as it's propelling itself forward, if it had a completely level back, gravity is forcing the front end of the dog down, and it's going to be pounding on the fore assembly. So we need a dog that moves with a slight uphill angle as it's propelling itself forward. So here's a picture of a dog at a moderate speed with a correct balance working trot. And we see here a nice underreach where the toe of the left hind leg is on the ground, but the heel is not. Now, the grass kind of conceals that. The extension of the hind leg is fully open with the toe close to the ground. This angle is open, this angle is open. Strong back, uphill to the wither. And here we see where the fore assembly, this joint and the shoulder and upper arm joint up here is supposed to be opening simultaneously as the dog strokes the forehand forward. And then this picture is a more extreme side gait, bitch moving at a faster extended trot. And again, we see the toe on the ground and not the heel. We see the right hind leg. And this angle here of the hock is the most desirable at this gait. Any more than this, and it's superfluous. Any less than this, and it's a locked, somewhat, or a fully locked hock. Next. Sometimes our dogs will pace. They pace because they're tired. They pace because they're going too slow. Some dogs pace more naturally than others. And it's easy for the handler to pull the dog out of the pace, and I wouldn't penalize the dog for pacing a little bit. Obviously, if the dog paces the whole way around the ring, you're going to have to instruct the handler to get the dog to trot, or you're not going to be able to judge it. So again, this is showing an illustration of the beginning of the forward action. Next. And again, what we want to see with the correct forehand is this joint and this joint opening simultaneously so that we have a sweeping motion. Sorry, you got to keep it close to the ground. A sweeping motion instead of a motion like this or any other kind of motion. Next.
I can kind of roll through these.
Yeah, we'll just roll through these. It's kind of, a sequence of how they go through their gait. So here's some examples of incorrect. All right, so we talked about propulsion, transmission, then you have extension with the forehand. If the shoulder assembly and upper arm is correct and the dog is moving correctly, so propulsion, transmission, extension. The dog's doing all that right, there's a good chance the dog is going to suspend. That's where all 4 feet are off the ground twice during the gaiting cycle. And it's a beautiful thing to watch, and it allows the dog, but it should be a forward propelling suspension, not just an up and down type of movement. So here's some incorrect things all in one dog. Now, if this is your dog, I apologize. We did not get your permission. All right. Toe dragging. So I always look for toe dragging pretty much right away when I'm judging. And the way I do it is the first time or two around the ring, I get over close to the rope and have the dogs go by me, and I look down and I want to be able to see if they're dragging the tops of their toes on the underreach, of their hind legs on the underreach. Now, having said that, some dogs will drag their toes slightly on a tight lead, but won't on a loose lead. So you want to be careful that you don't penalize dogs for doing something on a tight lead that's the result of having them on a tight lead instead of going loose lead. But obviously, if a dog's dragging its toes, it can't move efficiently. How long could it endure? And remember, we're talking about form follows function. These are supposed to be dogs that can gait endlessly. Same thing with the lifting in the front. Now this dog here has other problems. So the flat group and the high tail set is not only ugly, but it's causing poor underdrive and kicking up in the rear. Next. These are the disqualifications in the standard. Okay, next. And, we already addressed the versatility of our breed. So here are some breed examples. Heads. There's a beautiful male head from the front. There's another one. Now these are photographs that I had access to, didn't need permission to put up here, okay? So thank you so much. There's a side view of a beautiful head. Some of these heads are more perfect or extreme than others, but these are all good, acceptable male heads with good ear set. Good expression, good eye placement. You can tell these are all males. This is a bitch. Bitches can have strong heads and still be feminine. I think I already said that once, but I want to reinforce it. This is not a correct head. All right, now we're going to examine some motion pictures. Good ones first. All right, we've seen this one before, but this one does it pretty well. Some of these slides are a little distorted, so they're not quite, I'm not quite sure what, but it looks from here like it's a little bit. Anyway, there's another one that's pretty good. Next.
Yeah.
Okay. 4 assemblies. Good forehand photos. All right, see where both joints are opening simultaneously, and it almost looks like you have a straight line sweeping the leg out, and the foot is close to the ground. Next. And to me, these are the correct forehand action is one of the, appears to be one of the most misunderstood aspects of correct motion, because I see so many pictures that people deliberately post of this instead of this, which we're going to show you some examples of what I'm talking about. So this one isn't terrible, but again, the upper arm is, now again, these are pictures of moment in time, so we don't know the whole sequence, but it's the, it's to illustrate. So when we talk about the straight upper arm, when the dog is standing, instead of the upper arm having a return angle to form a 90-degree with the shoulder blade, we're talking about an upper arm that's straighter to the ground. And then when the dog is in motion, if this is not opening, if this joint isn't opening, a lot of people call it reaching from the elbow. We can use that terminology because Al Martin isn't here to complain about us using that terminology. But here's an example, and you can see that the foot is, what, 6 inches off the ground? And then the rear assemblies. It's a pretty good one. Not perfect, but
What would make it perfect?
what would make it perfect? Okay. Go back one.
They can't.
Take it back. Okay. So what we see here is we want to see more of a horizontal line with the lower leg bones and a 135-degree angle with the hock and the toe close to the ground. And here's a slide exemplifying that. So this is ideal with the hock opening. This is wasted motion, it's excessive, and this is not ideal at all. It's a locked hock. Very undesirable, does not give the forward thrust propulsion that the dog needs to work effortlessly. And this is using the stifle as being horizontal or parallel to the ground. All right, so here we have a couple of problems. Can you freeze it?
I'm gonna try.
Okay, first of all, this hock is way too flat on the ground. The heel of the hock is down there. And the knee joint was not open at all. It was completely locked, and the foot was kicking up in the rear. Here's another one. The knee joint is not opening. So sometimes we'll see dogs that look like they're following through because the hock and the foot are back at an angle. But if you look at the knee joint, it's not even close to being open and extended. A lot of times this is caused by a steep croup. So the dog cannot extend that leg back easily without kind of cycling it up, which is where you get the locked knee joint looking like, and it still looks like the foot's back, but it's not doing anything, and that's kicking up.
So where those toes end up landing, even if they're only, well, in this case, it's probably almost a foot above the ground, but those are almost two 90-degree angles there on the hock and the knee. And that's wrong. And people just look at where that foot is rather than the rest of that angulation. And you got to look at the whole package. So, I mean, there's a reason this dog is doing this, probably because the forehand is inadequate, and it has to make up for it somewhere. And this is a common area where it happens. I mean, the dog may even have a fine rear assembly, but if the forehand is off, you got to make up for it somewhere. The dog wants to achieve balance.
Plus, a lot of times it's because the croup is steep as well. You can clearly
See on
see
this one, yeah.
this one's got a short, steep croup. There's another one. And you'll see this in the ring, and you have to look for it. Do not ignore improper rear stroke. All right, how to judge a German Shepherd dog. So here's some observations and recommendations. Dogs are best judged on a loose lead. So at least at some point in your time in the ring, as the dogs are going around, you must see them on a loose lead if you really want to be able to evaluate them honestly and objectively. Moderate speed or moderate trot, which is the primary gait used for tending sheep, is preferred in order to really assess correct structure. Racing is not preferred. You need to tell the handlers to slow down. In some shows, I get literally hoarse from reminding handlers I need them to slow down. Especially if you're judging all breed shows with smaller rings, which is very challenging because the dogs are hitting the corner after a couple of steps. Every couple of steps are hitting another corner, and you have time constraints, so it's even more challenging. So you must have them slow down. And sometimes you might want to judge their side gate on the diagonal because you'll have a longer stretch to actually see more steps. And a lot of times judges will have the dogs walk a few laps to illuminate strengths and weaknesses not visible at a trot. Here's a really important one, and I see a problem with this so often, but you must observe the dogs go the whole way around the ring when they're doing a lap. I see so many judges, they watch them the first half or 2/3, and then they look away and go to the next dog. That last third is where you're going to get maximum performance from that dog. It's where I'm making my placement judgments. I want to see how they look in that last third. I'm watching them the whole way, but it's that last third that's probably going to make the difference for me. If you look away after they're halfway or 2/3, you're going to miss the best part. And that's why you end up a lot of times making wrong selections. Watch for the dragging toes, dead or weak tails, lifting in the front, locked hocks, and or knee joint. These are the primary faults that we're seeing in the ring today. And under reach, again, just the toes should be on the ground and good follow through without pickup. What we're showing you here is a good example of a tending trot.
Just a nice moderate speed, you know, and that's what we want to see.
With that dog can work all day long.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. I had already mentioned heads should be viewed from both the front and the sides for correct shape and proportion. That's so important. Shoulder conformation is critical. If they're too far forward, indicated by position relative to the neck wither and prosternum, it's a problem because then their shoulder assembly is too far forward of their center of gravity. They would never be able to have the endurance. And of course, you want to see the dog stand naturally to allow you to observe any concerns that may be covered by stacking. All right, let's talk about the loose lead exam. We have an instructional video, and also you have a handout, and there is a instructions for loose lead exam on the, can you flip to that?
You want to,
All right. So first of all, it's the first physical contact that you make with the dog. By the way, if you're going to do the loose lead exam, do it right. I'd almost rather you didn't do it at all if you're not going to do it right, because you're going to be under a false assumption about the soundness of the dog if you don't do it right, because it's so easy to hide temperament issues if the judge does not do a correct loose lead exam. No double handling during the loose lead exam. You should have the dog and handler come out to a designated place in the ring, stop, no double handling, and then the most important thing of all, it's called a loose lead exam because we want a loose lead. Any tension on that lead is like a courage assist to the dog. I've seen so many times where as the judge approaches the handler and the dog, and the handler's tightened up on that lead and the dog stands. And if the judge is smart enough to say, drop the lead or loosen the lead, and then takes one more step toward the dog, and suddenly the dog is not brave anymore and, does not behave properly. So you approach the dog, you don't have to pet him, you don't have to play with him, you don't have to do anything. You just walk up to them, make sure they're on loose lead, not being double handled, from about 6 to 10 feet away, and then I think it's important to at least make an effort to kind of reach toward the dog. If the dog stands there calmly and confidently, that's really all you have to do. But when you take that last step, and I've seen this so many times, you take that last step, and then I've seen dogs start to go like this, and then the judge just takes a step back and turns and goes to the next dog. That one more step might have revealed a problem. The other thing I'm seeing a lot of too is, in the interest, I think, of saving time or convenience, judges will have the dogs come out, they'll have a dog come out, the next dog come out, and instead of doing it when you do the individual for each dog, they're doing it all at one time, and the tendency then is the judge ends up standing in place, and the handler brings the dog right up to the judge, and turns it around usually and has it facing outside the ring. Handler, judge reaches down, pats the dog, take it back, next one comes out, does the same thing, and it's worthless. It's completely worthless. Don't do a loose lead exam if you're going to do it like that. The loose lead exam will reveal the worst offenders, but it does not guarantee that what you've got, if a dog passes it, is a sound dog. So do not write a critique that says a dog has great character or great temperament based on a 15-second loose lead exam in the ring. All right, because you will end up being embarrassed. That dog, there will be dogs who will embarrass you at the next show. All right, so what it really is, the loose lead exam is a behavior test. Did the dog behave according to how the dog is supposed to behave or not? Maybe the dog is so well trained that it behaves, but it is not sound, okay? Ring size, we know that at regional futurities, we require a 75 by 100 to judge the breed effectively. Small rings penalize better moving dogs. So at venues with limited space, if you can get the superintendent to combine two of the smaller rings together to give a larger expanse for our dogs to gate, that is desirable if that can be done, and sometimes they'll do it. That's it? Okay.
Thank you, Bob. Yes, I like what you put into this presentation, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I just wanted to say one more thing. Everything that he has presented, I agree with. The loose lead temperament test is strictly a friendly stranger kind of thing. But the big deal is when you judge German Shepherd dogs, please remember these are working dogs. I know Helen Gleason and I have talked about it, and the minute they start coming in the ring, my first thought is, what job could this dog do effectively? Okay? And if your conclusion is the dog is not able and agile and muscled well and structured properly to do a job, it is not a correct German Shepherd dog. Form follows function. If the dog cannot work, it is simply wrong. Okay? It's just not right. So don't make exceptions for soundness on any end of the stick. It's got to be a dog that moves effortlessly, fluidly, stands his ground, is confident, and looks like a German Shepherd dog. And believe me, it is hard to get all of those things in one package sometimes. Okay? But you got to remember, it's a working dog. I harp on this because I train my dogs, and I've worked dogs in the real world, and you really want a dog that can do it. And our standard calls for certain things for a good reason. I did a lot of detector dog work, and I've seen dogs come off the surge with bloody paws. I mean, absolutely wrong, because their pads were not washed. That's why we call it the good feet in our breed. That's why we don't want overambulation. It tires the dogs out. So just remember, when you're judging the dogs, these are working dogs. And thank you, Bob and Mike. Thank you.
When most people, everybody shows the dogs, they're at a normal or a fast gait around the ring because that's flashy. Do you find any good things walking a dog around the ring? Some judges
I
have you
do
do
walk
that.
the dog. I do walk the dogs at least half a lap, and I'm basically looking for football. I prefer that they walk on their feet as opposed to their hocks. I think that's a good idea. I want a good look at the pasterns, okay, and I also want a good look at that overline. Okay, so I do walk them. I don't know, do you?
Yep, same reasons.
It's a good question. Glad you asked.
The standard also describes your dog and walk.
Do what?
The standard also describes.
It absolutely does. It absolutely
Yeah,
does.
walk,
Okay.
cover,
It absolutely
around,
does.
and-
Yes.
We've been showing a lot in Albury and noticed what Bob said about many of the Albury judges looking at the first 2 or 3 steps, completely turning around and letting what the best part of our breed is when they get in these small rings, but finally get their momentum. How do we get that? And more people are showing in the all breeds, whether COVID or whether, I mean, there's a great surge in that now. How do we get this education to the people that are judging those dogs? How is our parent club? What do we do?
We put on these seminars
Yeah.
and we talk
But-
about it.
But how many?
It's difficult to reach all of them because
I
there's
know.
hundreds of judges out there, and most of them are not shepherd specialists. Okay, I'm a little mad at Bob, however, and we'll talk about it at dinner later. He revealed one of my closely guarded secrets. Is I judge them in the last third also, because by then the handler goes, well, she's not looking anymore, and he lets off the lead and he starts to slow up, and the dog sees the end of the line coming, so he starts to slow up, and you would be amazed what can happen in those last few feet. So I didn't want you to really tell that. I forgot to give you the clip notes.
Is Carmen still here,
He
by the
is
way?
gone.
He was down to the ring.
Okay, I took too long. I probably should have had him stand up. We wanted to have a few comments. So here is a score sheet. We're going to be going down to the main ring down here. We have 5 handlers coming with 5 different dogs. We're going to, this is for the people who have requested certificates. We're going to do hands-on, where we're going to do the different components of judging. And you're going to score the 5 dogs on your score sheet. Then you're going to turn it into me. And then I send nobody's grading them, but we can discuss them. And I send them into the AKC along with the roster of who was here. And then you get your certificate. I have your certificates for you, so. Okay? All right, we're going to try to gather the handlers and dogs.